this event as part of our Educator Appreciation Week. We want to honor both the special education teachers who work tirelessly for our children, and also the parents who work tirelessly to ensure that their children get the best possible education. So I'm going to let that be my introduction to Monica Holloway, who's written a wonderful book and is going to discuss it.
Hi guys, thanks for coming. Do you guys want to move sort of center? You'll help me out because my vision's going, and I just got a new prescription, but I haven't picked it up yet. So I'm going to just be looking up and down, and that's hard for a premenopausal woman. I'll say that quietly in the bookstore. We're going to show you a little video that some of you have seen, but some of you may not have seen, that will just sort of introduce you to the book a little bit. And thank you, Pam. Thank you for having me. And did you guys know there's coffee over there, cookies? Coffee, lovely. Yeah, right there. The shortbread stations. Yeah, the shortbread stations. Great.
Diagnosed with autism, but he didn't know. So that same afternoon, he happily played green ball and rush, a game he invented himself. My reaction to the diagnosis? I bought fish, and then hamsters, and then a rabbit, and then more hamsters, and 10 hermit crabs, land turtles, and dumpling frogs. In my desperation to avoid the reality of what Wills' diagnosis might mean for his future and mine, I began filling our house with scaly and fluffy creatures who were more dependent and less scared than I was. What I couldn't have known at the time was that one of those animals had become the one true friend that would raise my son's confidence, elicit his very first belly laugh, and have other children clamoring to play with him. Cowboy. A light blonde, brown-eyed woman who changed my son's life. I had the inestimable honor of being the first and only living creature to ever hear I loved Wills' lips.
Brandon,
Cowboy
talk to me. How much money do you have? I mean,
She would only have 2.5 years to perform the military. This is a love story. A
do you
story
have a
about
favorite
a boy
author?
and a dog who were everywhere together. And wind up in that ambiguous place between bravery
oh, okay, your favorite author goes.
and miracles that continue long after there was no one to toss the ball to. This is the story of Cowboy and Wills.
There are some books that are up to say, now look at this. Yes, sir.
I'm Monica. Want to see the slide?
Like 2 kids up back there, so
Two kids are perfect. What's great about this section is that this is where we belong, because I'm going to my jacket. Wills could never have been in this section with me at the age he was when I was doing this book. So up until 8 years old, he wouldn't have been able to be in this bookstore with all the kids in here. We come late at night or early, the minute they open, to pick out all of his books. So I think it's incredibly fit and fitting, and great that the kids are here. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. I spent yesterday, I'll talk really loud. I spent yesterday in San Juan Capistrano at the Shea Center. Do any of you know about the Shea Center? I didn't know about the Shea Center because it's Orange County. Hey guys. And there were 89 volunteers there. And we talked about equine therapy and horses helping children with autism, but they help kids with all kinds of disabilities, and no disability is too much for the Shea Center. So they have kids that can't literally hold themselves up. So they lay them on their tummies over the horses, and they get their sort of therapy and their yummy good time with the horses like that. It's really amazing. And they have speech therapy, speech and language, and they have speech and language and occupational therapy having to do with how the horses move and how their bodies work. And it's just an incredible, it just gave me all kinds of hope for what's happening, not just in our community, that's Orange County, But Wills rides at a ranch called the Children's Ranch it's over by Las Feliz, and we live in Sherman Oaks, so it's a little bit of a drive. But he does all kinds of therapy with horses there, and it's just been incredibly life-changing for him. So this is my book, Cowboy and Wills, and I'm going to read a couple. I think I'll read 3 passages from it, and then if you guys want to discuss anything, we can talk a little bit, or I can share a couple more things with you. And I'm Monica, and thanks for being here. Cowboy and Wills. The front window of the Pat Chalet was resplendent with swirling, glittery snowflakes and hand-painted holly leaves, reminding LA that it was indeed Christmas, despite the heat. Wills stood below a sign that read, "Special order your puppy or kitten today," his nose pressed against the glass, hands cupped on either side of his face. Inside were 3 baby cribs painted white, blue, and yellow. Inside each one, 2 or 3 fuzzy puppies, standard poodles, shih tzus, labradors, were rolling around and chewing on each other's ears or sleeping in piles. Will stayed cemented to his spot, quietly taking in the chaos through the window and listening to the cacophony of oohs and ahs wafting out the open door. I placed my hand on his narrow back. Michael, his dad, knelt down beside him, wrapping his arm around Will's waist. Wills looked up at me. "She's in there," I said. "Once we get her, we can get away from this crowded place." Tears streamed down his face. "She's waiting," he said. I pulled a wrinkled Kleenex out of my purse and dabbed his face. "Do you want me to go in and get her?" Michael asked. "I can bring her outside, away from the noise." "I'll get her myself," Will said, taking my Kleenex and handing it to Michael. As the 3 of us made our way inside, the clamor escalated. Parrots squawking, dogs barking, and people shouting into their cell phones, but Wills, he held steady. In front of us was a long, tapered staircase. "Cowboys at the top of those stairs," I told him. "She's up there all right," Michael agreed, giving Wills a little squeeze. Will's eyes followed that stairway all the way to the top. "Boy, she's high," he said, repeating the sentence under his breath 2 more times. "Does she even know I'm coming?" "Mommy told her you'd be here today," Michael said. Wills focused on the top of those steps. One of the employees eager to help us ran up to get her. Wills was pale, his eyebrows practically touching his hairline, and Michael picked him up. "This is pretty exciting, but a little scary too, huh?" he asked. Wills nodded. "Well, it's a big moment," Michael confirmed. Just then, the young employee walked down the steps carrying Cowboy, the most beautiful golden retriever Wills could have ever imagined. And I told Wills as calmly as I could because I really wanted to shout it, "That's her, honey. That's your girl, Cowboy." She looked sleepy with those irresistible droopy brown eyes, her blonde hair as fragile and fluffy as new grass. Wills wriggled out of Michael's arms. The store clerk handed Cowboy to Wills. "Hold her just like this," he said, tucking Wills' hand under her bottom. "Oh, she's a cutie," Wills said in a clear but timid voice. I placed a hand under Cowboy's warm tummy to help steady her. "You're a pro," Michael said. "You're doing great," I echoed. "Isn't she a cutie?" Wills asked again, eyes on the top of Cowboy's head. Michael and I were paying the final bill while Wills stood next to me, Cowboy snuggling against his small chest. The shop had exploded with even more shoppers crowding in to hold the Himalayan cats or buying squeaky rubber stocking stuffers. "Is that your dog?" A woman with perfect blonde highlights and a Birkin bag asked Wills. I instinctively stepped forward to rescue him from the awkwardness of talking to a stranger, but I didn't need to. "Yes," he told her, turning so she could see Cowboy's face. "She's a cutie." "Well, she sure is," the woman said. And then something happened. It was so small that nobody in the store would have noticed it, but to me, it was extraordinary. This woman, a complete stranger, patted Wills' shoulder, and he didn't bristle or bolt out of the front door in an absolute panic. He stood there, staring at us with a shy kind of, "What do you know?" smile. Because somehow, with this tiny heart beating next to his, Wills had stepped a little further into the world. Thank you. Is it easy to hear me read? Is it better to discuss? We want to hear some more reading? More reading? A little bit more reading? Okay. It's Huh? Okay. Wills used to hate our pool. At least he tolerated it. Nope. Wills used to hate our pool. At least now he tolerated it. When he was 2 or 3, he'd have a screaming fit if I tried to swim. Now he was much older. He didn't care if Michael or I swam. He just preferred to sit on the dry tiles near the shallow end. But during Cowboy's first summer with us, everything changed. If I dove into the deep end, Cowboy would run to the exact spot where I'd been standing and fling herself into the water. With her front legs arched and her head slightly lifted, she usually glided in, but there was the occasional belly flop. When I emerged 2 seconds later, Cowboy was already there, her face just inches from mine. "Don't you do it, Cowboy," I'd warn. But she couldn't help herself. She'd lunge at me, her front paws pushing on my shoulders, and down I'd go. "Well, she's a real swimmer," Wills would say. "Did you see that?" "Did I see it?" I asked, climbing out, sputtering. "She practically drowned me." "Not really, Mommy, right?" "No, not really, honey." I was looking for my towel. Cowboy was shaking off water, not once, not twice, but 3 times. I pulled a towel up over, Wills pulled a towel up over his head and just left it there. "Thanks, Cowboy," I said. I was covered in thin blonde porcupine quills. Cowboy was beginning to lose quite a bit of body hair for some reason, so I grabbed a towel and gently wiped her face, careful not to rub any more of her coat. Maybe she was shedding because of the heat, I wondered. I rolled her onto her back to check out the fur on her stomach when Wills, who'd been sitting with his feet tucked under his butt, fell into the pool. In less than 3 seconds, I was pulling him up off the bottom, even though he was only in 3 feet of water. Cowboy followed. Before I knew it, the 3 of us were splashing around in the hairy blue waves, Wills coughing, Cowboy wheezing, and me gasping. I held Wills around the waist with his back against my chest, my heart pumping, and I was hiccuping through my sobs. What if I hadn't been right there? What if he didn't know that all he had to do was stand up? "Are you okay, buddy?" I asked as calmly as I could, not wanting to scare him any more than my sobbing was already doing. "I'm swimming," he said. "You sure were," I managed. Wills abruptly pushed off my thighs and was out of my arms again. Startled, I rushed to grab him, Cowboy already there, dog paddling in a circle right above him. I pulled Wills up. This time he was mad. "Don't stop my swimming," he scolded. "You're swimming?" I asked. "Quit stopping it," he said. "Okay," I told him, hesitant about stepping back. The next thing I knew, Wills was near the towel rack, yanking my yellow goggles over his head. He splashed back into the water with Cowboy shadowing his every move. Wills was swimming. "Did you want to go into the pool?" I asked him when he came up for air, "or did you fall in by accident?" His straight bangs had become a series of small upside-down triangles dripping across his forehead, and the yellow goggles magnified his already enormous blue eyes. He looked like a cross between Swifty Lazar and Coco Chanel. "Cowboy wanted me to help her swim," he said. Well, everything came easier for Cowboy. "I love it," I said. "Now we can all enjoy the pool together. Finally! It's wonderful." I couldn't wait for Michael to come home from work. He'd called 20 minutes earlier, so I knew he was only minutes away. Cowboy and Wills were circling the shallow end, Cowboy's legs pumping up and down as if she were in the Sherman Oaks High School marching band. Michael appeared around the corner of the garage just in time to see Wills dive underneath Cowboy's stomach and come up on the other side, the goggles shielding his eyes from the nose and nose from the water. His canvas bag just dropped onto the tiles. "He's swimming," I said coyly, scrunching my shoulders up around my neck as if to say, "You tell me." "I can see that," he said, clearing his throat. "Hey, Wills, when did you start swimming?" "Cowboy was having trouble, so I just came in," he yelled back. "Well, you're so good," Michael said. "I'm excellent." Well, he certainly was excellent. Michael sat down beside me near the shallow end with his feet on the first step of the pool, his sneakers and the legs of his jeans soaking up the water. Wills resurfaced. "Hi, Daddy," he said playfully. "Well, hello, Mr. Wills," Michael said. Cowboy suddenly noticed Michael and began a quick water march in his direction. I jumped up and backed away. Michael, too slow. She'd already reached the stairs. Climbing out to smother him in kisses, she firmly pressed a front paw onto his groin, because Cowboy never missed an opportunity to step on someone's crotch if she could help it. "Daddy, look at this," Will shouted, keeping his body super rigid and falling backwards. "That's it," Michael said. "I'm coming in." "No," Wills cried, "you have clothes on." "I don't care," Michael said. "I'm swimming with my pal." "And Cowboy," Wills pointed out. Michael slipped into the pool, his jeans and shirt practically glued to his body. I joined him and we swam with Wills and Cowboy for almost 2 more hours. Later, in the pink light of the sunset, I watched Cowboy, now asleep on the wet tiles beside the pool, her lips blowing in and out with each snore. "You did it again, girl," I told her, running my hand along the side of her face. "You're a super dog." I wrapped myself in a thick towel and relaxed in a lounge chair, sleepy and content. The pool lights came on and I could see the wavy shadow of Michael and Wills cast long against the side of the pool. Oh, my sweethearts. I have one little short one maybe I'll close with, just to sort of give you a little button on the end, and then we can talk for a minute. The summer between first and second grade, Wills began occupational therapy. Wills needed help with fine motor skills, holding a pencil correctly, buttoning shirts, tying shoes, zipping pants, and using a fork. I didn't even know what OT was at first. It sounded more like a place where an ad executive might want to go to learn better marketing strategies than a colorful gym with sunny, warm classrooms. Wills and I drove into the parking lot of Therapy in Action in the heart of Reseda. The concrete building didn't look like a place of healing, as there was graffiti all over the walls. Wills immediately began humming, which was something new, something he did now when he was nervous. Well, I was nervous too. I wanted him to get better, though, and to have every chance for success, so I parked the car and walked around to open his door. He was sitting in his booster seat, staring straight ahead. "Hey, pal," I told him. "This looks pretty interesting," I said, starting to unbuckle him. "What's wrong with me?" Wills asked. I stopped, stunned. He'd never asked me this before, and yet it was a moment I suspected was coming sometime. My mind raced. I didn't know what to say to him. You know how much information to give without revealing too much at his young age, but I knew from Catherine, his therapist, I had to answer his question. "Well, buddy, your brain doesn't always tell your body how to move correctly or balance itself. This place will teach your body to listen to your brain. There's a big gym in there with all kinds of really fun equipment that will help you learn to balance on a bike, button your shirts, catch a ball, and tie both your shoes," I said. "Why doesn't anyone else come here?" he asked. "It's true, there aren't other kids in your class who come here, but there are many, many children who do. And every child, including everyone in your class, has something they struggle with. But it's not always the same thing. You need to learn how to hold a pencil so you can write neat letters and numbers. Jason is getting help from a tutor so he can recognize his numbers, but guess what? You already know yours. Let's go in," he said. I held his sweaty hand as we walked toward the front door. There were about 1,000 ways I could have comforted my son at that moment, but I couldn't come up with a single one. We walked to the entrance in silence. This was only the first time the question had come up. There would be many more. Would I actually have the courage to tell my son the truth? That he wasn't just imagining that the world was a more difficult place for him to understand, that it was, in fact, more difficult. That he'd been dealt a rotten hand in that regard, but only in that one regard, because I wouldn't change one freckle, one misunderstood moment, one tiny piece of him for anything in this world. I would change myself. I would change the things that other people said or thought out of ignorance or fear, but I would change so many things, but I would absolutely never, in a million years, change my boy. You guys are so sweet. Are there any questions that some of you know, some of you don't?
I just have a comment.
Sure.
One of our booksellers actually bought your book as an audiobook, and when she saw that we were featuring it, she came up and said, "Wow, that's such a great book." And the author read it herself, and she did a great job. And after hearing you read, I can see that that's absolutely true.
Thank you. That was a fun day. That was
Was it?
Yeah, well, it was 4 days, but it was probably long for the director, but fun for me. It was great. Yeah, I was really lucky that they had me read it myself. It was really good.
I liked your last piece too, because the point is when Wills asked, "What's wrong with me?" You made a point that he's differently able. Everyone has different abilities, and I thought that was really wonderful.
He did ask that he said when he was in 4th grade, he asked me flat out, and his dad, we were in all places, a hotel in New Jersey. I expected it to happen, I don't know, at home or in our backyard. I'm like, really? Are you touching? So nothing's wrong with touching, but I wasn't on my game. And it was Thanksgiving weekend, and we had to tell him, because he said it's called something. I know. He must have heard us say things. So we ended up talking to him about it and drawing the spectrum and everything we've been prepared to do. makeshift and did it, you know, in the hotel room, and he took it really hard. He cried himself to sleep, and I called his therapist and I said, I'm so upset. I think I did the worst thing I've ever done in my life, and we were crying, and he was asleep in tears, and she said, it'll be better tomorrow, and I said, I don't like you very much. I don't like you. I don't think this was the right time. I think he's too young, and I hung up, and he woke up about 3 in the morning, and he sits like straight up in his bed, and it was, you know, dark, and he goes, Mommy? Mommy? And I was like up like this, you know, and I said, yes, Wills. I said, let me get the light. I turned the light on, and he goes, I feel so much better. And from then on, we were able to talk about his autism in a much more open way. I talked to him about the books that we already had bought him, that were kid-friendly and ready for him. I said, I don't have him here because we're in New Jersey. So we went into New York the next day because we were going to go anyway, and went to the Barnes & Noble on 72nd and got him 3 books, and we read them to him that way. And it was hard. There were a lot more tears than just that, but he wanted to know. And
he seems like he's not. He seems like he's able to communicate.
yes, we're
Further
really
on the spectrum.
fortunate. Absolutely. I mean, that's one thing about this book that's been incredible to me is I've met so many families. Some kids are much higher functioning than Wills, although Wills now at 14 is pretty high functioning.
I have, because I've had students very high functioning autism in high school, and I didn't even know that they were autistic until they so I had no feeling at all.
That might be Wills now. We're mainstreaming him next year. He's at Frosted. Do you know Frosted?
I'm at Taft.
You're at Taft? Oh, great, great.
So, but we have right now it's changed. We don't have the cap, but we have like deaf and hard of hearing students, and that's really the true.
Department of Online Reservation building.
I've had a lot of high functioning autistic students in the classroom. And you don't, well, one student was really excited. I get the other kids do good idea, and I go, wow, I've never seen kids so excited about math.
And that's why.
But the kids were, it seems like kids are very, I mean, they can be mean. It seems like they're very sensitive to kids with disabilities. Now, if
you mean
yes. I mean, they were inclusive. It's almost like animals. Animals are very sensitive. And if a kid is normal, they're comfortable. Yeah, I've seen that.
See, I don't know this, so
I'm
so happy to hear this.
Well, that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen.
I have a young lady in my class who has an IEP also. And the other girls kind of surround her and protect her, make sure she gets her work. And
It's really interesting. And these same kids could be it could be very cruel to just a child without the disabilities. I mean, unbelievable. But with anybody, it seems like with a disability or like the deaf students, the kids are learning the sign, they're very kind. So that's what I've seen.
That's good to know. How old is the girl in your class?
She's a junior.
Oh, great. Okay, that's where we're headed. So
Yeah, so you're
he's in 8th grade. We kept him in preschool an extra year. So he turned 14 in May, and he's in 8th grade now. And then he's starting New Roads in September. Yeah, he's going to be. But
I
actually,
didn't realize that they had physical disability.
it depends on the child, but often there's an awkwardness, and certainly the fine motor skills. There's a deficit usually, almost always, in the fine motor skills. So buttoning shirts. He had really even until 6th grade, and he wouldn't mind if I said this, because for him, if it helps somebody, he's glad, because now he can do it, which is. But we had to make jeans. We would take the zipper and the buttons off and Velcro underneath, so it looked like he was wearing like a cool regular pair of jeans, but he didn't have to zip and button because he literally could not do it in 6th grade. He couldn't tie his shoes until the beginning of the summer after 7th grade. He tied his shoes for the first time ever. Even though we'd worked with him since he was 4. About time. So he said, I've been learning to tie my shoes for years. And he had been, you know? And so it's great. So now he can pick out any pair of shoes he wants. And it's good because it's a 13.5 shoe.
But he's connected.
They don't have Velcro.
You should. He connects with you. He said he was crying.
He's very sensitive. And actually, I saw something just as I was leaving today. Very sensitive, yeah. But I was really glad to see Matt Asner, who I just met on his radio show. You know Matthew? Ed Asner's son, yes. He's just a great guy and a great parent. His wife's terrific, and he's got this great son, Will. And he sent me this link to him. He was on Dr. Phil. And I was just telling Jess here that so they talk about autism, and one thing that Dr. Phil said that was so very sad. He said often little boys with autism are very sweet. There's a sweetness about them, and a kind of heartbreaking sensitivity about them. And it's true, but a lot of people hear autism because, I didn't know when before I had Wills. I had no idea. And I would think of autism as being something that was remote, really remote. And Wills can be remote, but
We all think Rain Man.
that's unfortunate, but it's true. I guess I did too.
That's a reasonable request.
What I was thinking was, are you sure these kids are diagnosed? Is it in food, in diet, or is it neurological?
I think the I don't know. I think the verdict is out on that still, but I know it's hard for me to talk about that. Not because I think you should do anything you can do to help your child in any way, autism or autistic or not. We did try the diet. It didn't help Wills per se, but there was a child in Wills' classes. I knew when he was on the diet, and I absolutely knew when he was on the diet. You could literally tell his focus dropped, his academic ability, he was just not focused. And then when he got back on the diet, is it chelation? Is that the word is chelation? Then he was super focused again. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I can't say that the diet doesn't do anything. I don't understand mom. No, but I mean, my opinion is sort of like, I don't know what to tell you.
No, I was just wondering because it sounds because there's all the freaking processing for you.
Right? The corn
What's wrong
syrup.
with the salt that came
You
up?
know, it's hard to know. Because I thought that, I guess the definition of autism is broad.
Fred, you're going to have to learn to read a little more than your
Yeah,
little
that's
bit
right.
longer books, that's all. Because
Your
your age group.
son is expressing emotion like that. There's a lot of people that have autism.
Lots, yeah. 1 in 98.
198?
1 in 8 boys.
So my friend's daughter is yes, I was just wondering,
It's so sweet now that Wills is older and that a lot of his friends, hey Maxie.
he has friends too.
Oh yeah, well, and especially now that he's at Frosted where a lot of the kids, well every kid there has a challenge of some kind. So he feels so, it's good to be the mayor sometimes, He came from a mainstream school. And so he was the mayor, for a few years. And it changes. Different weeks, different people are the mayor. And so all those kids have an opportunity to be sort of normal, popular, liked. And so they're very confident at Frosted. And it's amazing. And so we're really worried about taking him out of that. On the other hand, he is ready to step forward into a bigger role. He doesn't want to, but he's ready. And I think he'll do well. He's on a regular baseball team, a little league team. And the guys there are like, dog pile on Wills. And at first we were like, no, my God. Because Wills is huge and they're tiny and he loves it. He's underneath the dog pile, just smiling and very happy. He's a major hitter, which helps. He can catch anything, bless his heart. I'm glad he's not here. But he really is scared, as like I am. I gets it from his mom. A ball comes toward me, I'm like, well, I'm out of here. I gotta go. So outfield's not his strong point, but he's a good hitter. And last year he went into the junior league. I didn't have a good hitting year because he wasn't used to those fast pitchers. So now he is. So he's been hitting them over the fence again, and I think he's like, whew, thank God, because it gives him a spot there, a place to be.
I'm glad you came back around to it, but when with a case like Wills, where it seems to me like you hardly have time.
Yeah.
You can just hardly time. Is it protocol to have a discussion with his public school or with his teacher, and would they then have a discussion with the class like?
Not now. No.
Because kids at that age can be scornful, and then like you said, it's almost like Animal Kingdom. You see the kids that will rally around and protect. But
they know instinctively. I was oblivious.
Is it a thing where the teacher has to kind of give the class?
Not usually in a mainstream.
You'll know it's against the law for teachers to
Yeah,
say
we're not.
I had a Tourette syndrome child one year, and I couldn't
Oh,
say
the
that.
teacher can do that.
But I didn't know because it came like 3 or 4 weeks, and some of the kids said, "You didn't know?" And I said, "No." But I said,
Well,
I
like
think
they're
that they were all They know. It's almost, they know. They know it. They know immediately.
It's not anything at our house
I
that
don't
we
know.
have any shame or secret to say about, and we've really taught Wills because a lot of times a joke will go by him and he'll say actually, are you making fun of me or is that a joke?
Oh.
And the kid will say, I'm making fun of you. And he's like, don't make fun of me. You know, I mean, whatever they end up saying. This is also not really happening now that he's a little bit older. But he'll say to somebody, like we took a friend of his who doesn't have any kind of diagnosis to the Santa Monica Pier, which Wills wouldn't have been able to go to about 4 years ago, but now it's fine. And they said, Wills, let's go on the one that races around, just the little roller coaster. And Wills said, you know, because of my autism. But it really wasn't because of his autism. He just was too scared to go on. He's like, that's because of my autism. And I said, Wills, I don't think that's an autistic thing. And he goes, probably not. So it was so cute. But that's the first time I ever heard him actually say, you know, got autism, gotta go. Gotta get in the car. Well, he's very comfortable with it now, which is so good. But he would, I don't know what he'll do in the mainstream school, if he'll feel comfortable talking about it. Not, on his baseball team, I told the story yesterday, they were teaching them to slide. And so Wills would run up, and Wills is 6 feet tall.
Oh my gosh.
He's big, and my husband's 6'5". But he's also a big kid. So, and then there's these really small children with him, you know. And so he would run up to to second base, and then he would stop. He would lie on the ground and roll like a hot dog over the base. You know, and he was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, he goes, "Well, I don't like to get myself too dirty." They're like, "Oh my God, Wills, come on!" You know. So then they knock him down and put dirt all over him. And he's like, "All right." So they talked to him about how to slide. They gave him his knee pads, and they gave him everything. So he had all his padding. We're like, "Okay, Wills, go!" He runs to second base. He stands there. He lies down, and he rolls over like a hot dog. So and when he turned up, he goes, "That's the best. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it any better than that. I do not want to slide. I'm not going to slide. I'm not comfortable with it." And he didn't have to say I have autism, but then the kids were like,
Is his speech effective?
"Perfect. His speech is."
You can't tell with his speech.
Yeah, he actually, now it's more appropriate age-wise, but he was talking like that when he was very little. And you might know from the dialogue in here, and some of that was actually lifted off tapes I have of him saying, you know, "I'm excellent." And I was saying yesterday, we were driving over the hill one day, and he wanted water, and I always carried water. You guys are all mom, you know. It's like, I didn't have water with me, and I was stuck in traffic. And this is what he says from the back seat. He said, "There's a stomach-wide water shortage back here." I mean, that's how he spoke, always. But he didn't actually have words until he was 2. He's very bright.
That's why you can tell because he's aware.
Yeah, but he has a big deficit in math, particularly, which is hard because he wants
That's
to
all
be
right. The
better.
whole world.
He gets it from me.
No.
Yes. Well, the other night I was with this couple here, and Troy said, "I gave a 40% tip," and I said, "No, I didn't." It was like a $15 thing, and I gave $20. I said, "Oh my gosh, that's so bad." So this is Wills' mom, so I don't think he's got a problem. That's not good.
I'll wait on you.
Whatever. So maybe that's just me.
But it's interesting the way you're phrasing things. That seems to there's someone who translates, and the way you're translating sounds very similar to the way the deaf students speak. You know, in the phrasing, it's interesting. It's very similar.
It's interesting that Wills has a lot of friends that don't have speech for whatever reason, and they talk through their iPads. So we got Wills an iPad.
Okay, so that's why the conversation, because the way he phrased it.
No, he always talked like that.
Oh, he always did?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
no, but he's able to communicate with all his friends that don't have language.
Oh, that's so neat.
And it's so great. So he's on the bus teaching the other kids how to use his iPad and use the language feature on it so that they can talk to these other kids as well. And so his poor iPad is, it's really all dirty and it's a mess, and I'm glad.
So I was just wondering, because we all pick up things from the people we associate with. And I was just saying the way he was, the way things are phrased from the deaf student seems, it just seems similar.
He's not as pedantic now at all. I would say his phraseology is pretty good.
No,
but then it wasn't. Then it was
very clever.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, very clever.
That's what I mean. It's like the words are clever. It's just phrased differently.
Yeah.
It's almost more descriptive and interesting to listen to.
Yeah, his dad writes for The Simpsons, and I would never let Wills watch.
Oh, okay, well there you go. That's why he's descriptive.
Yeah, right. I would never let Wills watch The Simpsons. Of course, it's mean, and I love it, and it's he bought my skirt for me, but I'm like, it was really, and I went and I saw, I was at a reading, and this was my first book, not this book, and we were talking about my son, and I said, I haven't really let my son watch The Simpsons, and they're like, but his dad works on it. I said, I know, but he's only 9, and they're like, 9? My son, she said, my autistic son got all of his social skills from The Simpsons, and I'm like, I'm sorry, that's awful, that's horrible. But actually, it was so big, right? So we went home immediately. I'm pulling out the DVDs, and we're screening them for sex and saying, okay, we're going with that one's good. Children's
The
section.
Raven ones.
Right.
For the Halloween.
That's true. That's
Like,
funny.
I used to use it in high school.
Oh,
in
that's a
music
good one.
classes.
Talk to me. Maybe Michael can come and see you. He loves to go to, he'd just come over and say hi to the kids and talk about But anyway, she was absolutely right, because the jokes in there are so specific and so blown out. He really did start to sort of get, not bad things, but he was able to sort of laugh at things that weren't exactly, he would find sort of offensive, and he would be like kind of smiling or giggling, and I said, and he loosened up quite a bit. It was really wild. But I don't know if I'm proud of that. and then he ended up writing the beginning of an episode. He wrote the first 12 pages, and it got nominated for a writer's Guild.
Oh, that's awesome.
So he went with his dad, he had his first tux, and he wanted a white, he said, nobody takes a limousine to the Writers Guild Awards, but of course, Will said, can we have a white limousine? I'm like, absolutely, so we got stuck in McDonald's in a white limousine at the Writers Guild Awards. But he didn't win, but the Simpsons writers were like, let's go out in the hallway and you can do your speech for us. So they all went out, and he did his speech for them, and then he said, it's too loud, we got to get out of here, so then he left. But, so it's been a big gift to him to be able to.
Does he watch Big Bang Theory at all? I mean, I love that Asperger's character.
I know, he
It's
does not,
amazing.
it makes him uncomfortable, that show. It's
That's it.
interesting,
Very
but
mature.
he's
Got
a
a lot
myth,
of sex jokes.
That's true.
he's a Mythbuster maniac. And so we finally got to meet the Mythbusters, and then went up to San Francisco last month. I didn't go, my husband went, and so they could meet. Do you guys know who the Mythbusters are? Oh, they're like scientists, and they like any kind of myth, like say a James Bond movie where people drop in an elevator and survive it by jumping, then they reenact that to see if it's plausible. So basically, it's every myth you can think of, they debunk or they say, confirm. So when we finally met them and Wills met them, he said to me, Jamie, who's on the show, he said, does Wills have Asperger's? And I said, he does. And he said, because I do. And he goes, oh, I have to talk to Wills. So then he went over, and those two, almost 2 hours they talked. And when Wills came out of there, he was like a different person. Because he said, I had no idea, And I said, what does that mean to you? Like, no idea. Do you think people have an idea, but what does that mean to you? And it's really interesting because they said that almost their entire audience, when they go to different events like Comic-Con or whatever, they're Asperger people, a lot of them. Because they like to know how things are taken apart and put back together. I guess that's part of it. I guess not all.
So I know I'm part of your entourage. I actually had a question since we're talking about school stuff. What would be something that you want to, if you could share one thing with educators about, like, handling kids with autism or kids on the spectrum, like, what would be that thing? Because you've kind of been through it more than I have. Like, my little guy's 5, your little guy's older.
Well,
what would be that one thing?
If Wills was 5, I wouldn't be here for one thing. I'd be home going, no, it would be. That's the one. Wait, one. I don't know about one, and you guys can help me.
I'm here when they've already been successful. One student that I have, he was very academic, but his voice, you could tell that he was a little bit different. But the other one, I couldn't. So.
I would say for an educator, my biggest hope is that they're accepting and welcoming, and that if there is a child in your class, and God knows the time, I know you don't have hardly any time, but if they could come to the family or speak to the therapist, or get themselves a little bit more educated about autism. It's not your job to be an autistic specialist. That's what's hard. That's my job, to make sure that whatever school he attends is not taxing on the teacher or the other students. That he goes to a place that's appropriate for everybody. That's the main thing. And Wills did have an A all the way through until 5th grade, yes. But she was a third teacher in the classroom. And so kids didn't know that he would, and Wills didn't know that she was there just for him.
Oh.
So she actually helped a lot of the students, but he didn't know. But then he knew. And when he was getting ready to go to Frostic actually, and he said, well, I guess I'm leaving Lynn. I guess she's staying at Children's Community School. And I said, and they hired her full time. And I said, yeah, she's going to stay and teach there. And then he said, he goes, was Lynn there just for me? And I said, Lynn actually was there for everybody, but originally, yes. And then she didn't need to be there just for you. So now they hired her full time, but she was there just for you in the beginning.
Is there one thing that they're very sensitive to? Because we never mean to hurt, but is there one thing that's like almost universal to the kids? It's like no, you never do one particular thing.
You would never use this in class anyway, but don't ever use the word retarded. And you never would anyway, but the kids do. About themselves, they'll be like, I'm so retarded. I've said that. I've said this in my life, and it wasn't that long ago. And I was like,
I've said I have brain damage.
All right. Well, in my first book, I swear to you, I swear I say something about, I said, what was I talking, I was talking about, what was I talking about? And I said, whatever it was, I said they would actually probably think I'm retarded. It's written in my first book. I could just myself for it now. And I don't know why I even said that. But now I know. Like another kid saying, oh my God, I'm so retarded. You just see Will's face. It's like, it's very, very hard for him. But that's not really for educators. That's more of a social. But he also has to understand that it's a slang and it's like, and it's not meant to be hurtful. But,
and
like
if you're taking a French class and they say, who's it all retard?
We did that too. And he knows that already. Yes, exactly right. That's great.
When my students walk in late, and I'm looking at the clock, and they're 5 minutes late, I look at them and I'll shout out that, and that means you're late.
That means you're late. Yeah, that's great.
It almost seems like, to your credit, it almost seems like, I missed part of the conversation, so I hope I'm that value, but it almost seems like you have this wonderful dynamic in which there's a gift where you just tell Wills the truth. When he asks about something, you just tell him the truth.
His therapist would be laughing so hard if she heard you say that.
And then it's just, I'm just observing, and then the energy of whatever that was scary, and it's almost like we could all learn a thing or two about that.
Well, I've learned to do that. My instinct was to lie, hide, and isolate. Period. I was so frightened. That was my instinct.
Well, you didn't invent that problem, believe me.
No, of course. No, I understand, except that I'm so fortunate to have had his team around him. When I would try to take him to preschool, where he just, it seemed like I was honestly killing him, leaving him at preschool. He wouldn't eat, he would vomit, he was crying. I'm like, what am I doing? This is insane. The child is 3. Why am I doing this? So then I would sneak him away from preschool, and his therapist was the consultant at the school, and she'd call and say, where's Wills? I'm like, he's at the farmer's market on 26th Street. And she's like, get him over here. I said, I can't do it. I can't have him be so miserable. She's like, he has to come to school. He has to know that he can handle it. And if you show him he can't, and you agree with him that he can't handle it, he'll never handle it. She said, where are you again? I'm like, oh no. She's like, I'm on my way. So she comes over, talks to me, but then I'm crying. And she's like, listen, you're doing the right thing. So I had to just really trust that somebody knew a whole lot more than I did about my own child. And it was really hard. And that day I told him about his autism when he asked. I knew I had done the wrong thing. I absolutely knew. I'd never seen any child that young fall apart like that, fly back on the bed like he'd been shot, basically. He was like, oh my God, and just sobbing until he slept. And he slept, a long, like almost 15 hours. And I was on the phone with her so mad. And she's, to her amazing credit, she's always been right on.
But after that incident, were things like that easier for you?
No, they weren't. They were always heartbreaking.
But it almost seems like Wills champs up and he just says, okay.
That's what's good.
He has this acceptance, and then when it's released, he soldier forward. It's a remarkable. That does what
it helps a lot, yeah. And now, with you in my life, and there are people in my life that help me be honest, and that teach me about, this is my friend Holly. I always say, like, her great gift to me is that she can tell me something really difficult in a really honest way. And then I say to myself, I want to be that kind of friend too. I want to be that kind of mother, and I want to be that kind of person. So I have people in my life that teach me that every day, you know. And it's my husband is worse than me about wanting to hide behind things and not wanting to say what really is. And he got his butt kicked pretty good. So he's now having to say like so Wills is trying to help Michael be more honest with his feelings, and Michael was really frustrating. Well, we have 2 dogs after Cowboy, so we have 2 dogs at our house, and they're crazy, and actually we just got a trainer. There are all kinds of reasons. And it had to happen. And Michael was really disappointed. You haven't met him. But you will, at the dogs. And he was just trying to be like it was okay. And Will said, why can't you just be mad at them? You should just be mad at them. He said, it's confusing. It's confusing to them. Meaning it was confusing to him. So, yeah, so now I guess we're all trying to practice. We're trying to practice it. Or I often say about somebody I don't really like really well, I'll say, you know what, they have a really good heart. And he goes, that's code word for, you don't like them. He said, that doesn't seem right. And I said, gosh, it's true. It's so true. So I find myself stopping and saying, she really does have a good heart, but I don't agree with this or that. He's like, yeah, okay. Because I sort of taught him that really is my way. Or the phone will ring and I'll be like, don't get it. I'm in the bathroom. Like, I've done that before. And he's like, really? You're in the bathroom? I'm sitting on the couch like this. Yes, I'm going there now. So I can't do that because he expects me to be honest. And I owe that to him. But it sucks.
And you probably tell them never to use that word, right?
Pardon me?
You tell them never to use that word, right?
Yes, never.
I walked into a classroom where the teacher had made the kids write that on on a sheet of paper. Just this last Friday, there was somebody in the classroom like, I will not say sex in the classroom.
I just said it to a child. That's why I looked at Steve Evans was still there. I was like, oh my goodness.
There's a little child over there.
Oh my gosh. He knows me really well. But I don't know.
He's been exposed to you.
He's been exposed to me. Yeah, so.
Well, it almost seems like after that initial incident that Wills can handle the truth.
Yeah.
Better than a lot of us.
Yeah, it does. I'm proud of him that way. I'm really proud of him.
He's arguably more evolved than many in that way. Just hearing it and saying, okay.
Yeah, it's funny, funny, interesting, but he was chosen on a committee. They choose, everybody gets to do this, but he got to do it one week last year, where he went in and he learned how to be a mediator.
Oh, wow.
And it was really intense, and he got Senator Price came, and they got certificates, and, you know, he didn't remember Senator Price. And it was great. And so then he was in this whole big brouhaha on his bus, and with little kids. And so he finally got everybody settled down. He was like, you can't talk yet. You talk first, and then you can talk. You can't say anything until she... And then all this, and the bus driver said, she said, wow, Wills, that was great. I didn't have to do anything. And he said, I'm a professional mediator. And that's kind of like, that'll go so far socially, I don't know, you know. But in a way, it's he knows more than I do about, you know, how to be fair and how to, you know, and he'll soften up a little bit around it and not have to be a professional mediator to do it, but just be a person. So. She can do well, I'm happy to sign.
Yes.
Or
we would ask that if you would like to have a book signed, that you purchase it first. And
sure.
let me give you.
Sign this book and put it back.
Well, actually, we're going to do it. We're going to ask you to sign
That's so
some stuff as
funny.
well, because it sells really well. So you have your thank you so much.
Happy to
Yes, I do.
It was fun.